All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Clayman. We are going to get started here in just about 2 minutes. I'd like to give everyone a couple minutes to gather because we are missing some of our signed up attendees. So you can look for us to rejoin you in just 2 minutes. And we're going to get started in just one more minute, just letting some final attendees join. I see almost everybody's here. We'll give them one more minute. All right. Well, it is 12:03 and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So if anyone hasn't made it yet, we'll just let them join in this program already in progress. Welcome, everyone. I'm Dave Clayman, CEO and co-founder of 12 Points. And I'm very honored today to have a great guest with us, my good friend, Joe Basile. Joe is the fourth generation president of Catania Oils, and his family is a great story of what it means to be a family business, the success they've had, the challenges they've had, everything, and they have survived it. And Joe is not only a good friend, but someone I greatly admire his leadership. So it is a great honor for me to have him join me today. Joe, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Dave. I certainly appreciate the invite and look forward to the conversation.
Awesome. Well, for everyone in the audience, let's just get started at the beginning. Can you kind of share the origin story of Catania and how your family became involved in the business in the first place?
Absolutely. So my great-grandfather immigrated to this country around 1900. He came from Sicily, San Panicetto. Over there, he used to go house to house selling olive oil. So when he came here in search of the American dream, that is pretty much what he brought with him. And quick fun fact, when he came over here on the boat, he brought a few barrels of olive oil. And unfortunately, those barrels were destroyed during that voyage. So he literally arrived here with nothing and had to start, from scratch, literally. So certainly a long way today from where we started out, but that's kind of how we got going. And, he went house to house, knocking on doors, selling cans of oil.
And I know you guys measure things in volume right now. So talk about 4 barrels of oil destroyed. How many pounds of oil do you sell now a year?
So we sell close to 500 million pounds of oil a year. That's about 1 million gallons a week if you don't do pounds. So certainly a lot of volume. Back in the day, they used to fill everything by hand. We fill roughly, call it 100 gallons a minute on several of our lines. So there's a pretty significant difference from a size and scope compared to back then.
That's pretty astounding. I always think 500 million pounds. Sorry, that's crazy.
Yep.
So 4 generations is an extraordinary legacy, very rare in family business. What values or principles have been passed down throughout the generations that you still follow today?
For me, I think it's first and foremost is really the company culture and treating people right. I think today a lot of business leaders talk about culture, and that's something that has been talked about for the last 15, 20 years, maybe in business in general. Years ago, that was always critical to specifically my grandfather. Although there really wasn't any books to read, anything of that nature, he was a big believer in just treating people right, recognizing that our employees are our most important asset. So it's really about, taking care of people, whether that's employees, whether that's, the customers. And then I would say, a close second to that is really never being satisfied. Having that mentality. My grandfather had a particular saying that I really enjoy, and his saying was, "I do not like cobwebs." And what he means by that is never sit still, never be satisfied, don't become, complacent, continuing to move. And if you're not, your competition is going to consume you.
I love that. We always use the term pleased but never satisfied, but I've kind of not thought about that in a little while. So it's a good reminder. Thank you. So, on to the fourth generation. What has the handoff process look like from one generation to the next? Structured succession plans, or just kind of more of an organic transition, or how's it worked?
Organic. Certainly for us, there was no blueprint. There really was no, it was always, I think, in my dad's head, but there was never this big conversation or, hey, this is what we're doing and why we're doing it. For me, I was really brought into the business at a very early age, as was my younger brother. Coming from a large, family, the two of us on weekends used to come to the plant with my grandfather. He used to actually pick us up, 12, 13 years old. Plant was not running, but just, being here, he'd put us to work, whatever that is, emptying trash barrels, cleaning rollers on the machinery, replacing leakers, like whatever it is. As I came out of, school, it was kind of that rapid acceleration as well, taking on, more and more responsibilities, wearing different hats. Back then you wore, 10 different hats versus what we do today. But, certainly there really was no plan. There really was no, thought. There was no, D-Day plan. God forbid something happened to my father. So obviously it's different, today than what it was, back then.
Did you always know you were going to go into the family business?
I did. I always had that, passion that I wanted to, be here. Not necessarily, knowing what it would look like, but I always felt wanted to be part of it in some, shape or form.
Yeah, my story is not completely dissimilar. When I was a kid, my great grandfather had started an antique store. I never got to meet him, but my grandfather Sam used to bring me to the store every Saturday morning when I was like 5, 6 years old, and I'd sweep the cobwebs literally out of all the antiques. So I guess I was cleaning out the cobwebs that your great grandfather around. Did you always were in the business though, right? You did not take a time out in a different company?
Correct, and that's my one regret. We were in a different place, years ago. There really wasn't much of a leadership team, in play here. Very close circle relative to, who was trusted, who had keys to the building, who had an alarm code, that type of stuff. So my dad took a lot on his shoulders and really was, hoping that I would come into the business just really quick, because he kind of seen me as somebody that he could offload some of that responsibility to over time. So as I look back and reflect, now being in the seat I'm in and the experiences that I've had, that is the one regret that I had, is I never had that outside experience. Having to learn how to be a leader, how to lead, how to motivate people, how to be accountable. Those are all difficult. And really not being on some type of leadership, training program or whatever else. It was, everything was internal here. So how do other companies function and work, and being able to bring those type of things into the company would have been nice to have. But that's the only one regret that I would have relative to that.
If you're not comfortable talking about this, is no problem. But did you have any challenges coming in that way? Not, you were kind of the anointed one, the heir apparent, so to speak, and you hadn't gone and done something else. Was that challenging?
It certainly was challenging. I think to some degree, the first part of it was recognizing that you needed it. Because, early on in my days, as I was taking on different, roles, both internally and externally, you can appreciate you're super busy and you don't have time for anything. And for me, that was my first excuse. When it was prompted to me like, hey, you should look to join this group or do this or do that, it was like, I don't have time for it. And that was my default excuse for a period of time. And it wasn't until a business partner of ours, we had another olive oil company based in New Jersey, who was in Vistage, a third-party peer-to-peer CEO group that obviously you're familiar with. He actually forced me to some degree to get into a group. He had corporate call me, and then next thing you know, Phil Thomas showed up at my door, and I signed on the dotted line. And if it wasn't for that, I don't know where I'd be. I don't know if I would have, or when I would have sought third party, call it support, to really develop the leadership pieces. And now that I've gone through that for the last, call it 8 years or so, I look back and I say, you're crazy not to embrace something of that nature.
Yeah, a little plug for Vistage there from both of us. We're both big fans and do a great job, but I absolutely would see Phil showing up on your door and having you sign right then and there. That sounds about right.
Yep.
What lessons would you say you learned from previous generations that you now apply as a leader?
I would say it's first and foremost, it's really driving that company culture, taking care of employees. One of our core values is we are family. And that is, critical, I think, for us, specifically being a family business, but recognizing that, look, it's not just about the Basile family, it's about the Catania family. So really driving that home, I think, has been, important. My father learned a lot from his dad, and he was a huge, people person. Literally taking the shirt off of his back to take care of his, people. So that's kind of been, passed down the generations, as well as, look, the company cannot speak for itself. You have to be the one that defends her and make sure that the company's being, taken care of. And then somewhat going with the, I don't like, cobweb mentality, it's never become complacent. To me, I think those three things are critical relative to the position that I'm in.
Those are some awesome lessons. What were the most difficult decisions you've had to make during a generational shift, or you, or one of your other predecessors, maybe?
I would say specifically for me, it's moving on from those legacy employees as the company has grown in size. Whereas, their skill set is not appropriate for the company size today. We were very fortunate to have, a lot of, growth over the last, call it, 20 years. And we had some really, really long-term tenured people who were loyal to my father, recognizing that they are in a particular position and they just don't have that ability for that particular role. Moving on from them was difficult, or is difficult, and to some degree, took longer than it should have. Again, it kind of conflicts with that internal core value of we are family and taking care of your employees and so on and so forth. And I had a handful of those that developed, and they were hard. They were extremely hard to deal with, and those are some of my early on issues that I processed through Vistage. And I took longer than I should have to really move on from some of those employees. And you kind of have that transitional piece from my dad to myself, and whose decision is it? And it's okay, they're loyal to him, and I had great relationships with them, and it was kind of like I didn't have the heart, in a sense, to move on from somebody that was critical to him, that was there through thick and thin, and so on and so forth. So that, by I think any other example, would be the hardest thing that I've had to go through.
Yeah, and something that's very admirable, obviously, when your number one core value is we are family, to say to some member of the family, we're kicking you out of the family, is hard. But at the same time, you mentioned protecting the ship, protecting the company, right. And you're also taking care of more members of the family than that one that you're asking to leave by asking them to leave us often.
Right.
So that's very admirable, very difficult, but something I've definitely seen you grow in the time that we've been together. So obviously, Catania Oils has grown tremendously, just an unbelievable story. How have you balanced tradition with innovation?
I guess I would answer that by saying that we've, really grown by staying, true to our roots while embracing change. I think as a fourth generation, family business, traditions, hard work, integrity, that deep sense of responsibility, that really remains, core to the culture that we have here. However, at the same time, recognizing that we need to do things differently, invested into new technologies, building out, a stronger leadership team, modernizing the operation to support that continued, growth. And then really it's about the core value of we are family. Ensure that, everything that we're doing aligns with who we are, and it strengthens and impacts, the employees, the community, the customers, all the above. So I think that's really what it's about.
Yeah, maybe just a minute on that expansion. I mean, just the site, your new facility is so impressive. I guess not as new anymore, but just what you've done and how the innovation has fueled your growth. If you could spend a minute on that.
Sure, and I think, for us, it's that constant reinvestment back into the company. That has been the MO going back to my grandfather and my dad. Every single year, you take out money to pay taxes, and everything gets plowed back into the company, which fuels the growth. We wouldn't have what we have today if it wasn't for the reinvestments of the profits. Recognizing that you need to do some vertical integration. So for us, going into blow molding and making our own bottles here at the packaging plant, as well as recognizing that it's also about building, supporting the team. So it's not always about the hard assets. It's how do you support that leadership or that next leader relative to training and education, getting them on a proper track to, next man up off that bench type of mentality.
Yeah, that's something that's very impressive. I know that your family's always done is that reinvestment. A lot of, no judgment, a lot of families are all about how much can we take out of the business to support the outside life. You guys have always been, how much can we leave in the business in order to keep it growing and protecting that family and taking care of that broader Catania family, and that's really very impressive.
Yep.
Any key turning points in the company's growth that you'd point out that were moments that really said, yep, that made the difference of the next spurt?
I would say first and foremost, it's recognizing that we needed a real senior leadership team. When I first entered the business, we were probably, I'd say 40 employees, maybe doing like 60 million in revenue, I want to say. Pretty soon afterwards, we were 100 million, 100 employees. Didn't even have a controller. We had a bookkeeper. Didn't have somebody in HR. So 2000, I don't know, 7, 8-ish, 9-ish, around then, we started to recognize that, okay, we need a controller. Hey, we need somebody in HR, and started really building out a leadership team, which is now, in place, and we've made several improvements and scaled that team a few different times over the last, call it, 10, 15 years. But that, I think, is the most significant, turning point that we've had in the last, 15, 20 years, I would say.
Yeah, again, a lot of talk about people here and how much people have shaped the business. So on that topic of HR, how do you keep personal family dynamics from interfering with the professional decisions?
Well, that's, hard to do, specifically when you have, family that grows in size. And I think it's, certainly a different dynamic when I look back at my, dad's, generation. It was kind of him and his siblings to some degree. He didn't really have the cousin situation. For me, I have that. I have siblings, I have cousins, I have aunts and uncles. We have absolutely had our, share of issues that we've, learned from. My father would always, say, the company is here for the masses, not the individual. It's hard to do, but when you step through that door, you got to kind of, put in check any personal issues that may be outside, and you really got to stick to the business. And it's not, hey, Dad, it's, hey, Anthony, or whatever, it's that type of, call it, mentality. It's going to happen. Stuff is going to spill over, personal stuff's going to spill over into the business. And at the end of the day, you got to deal with it. You got to find ways, whether it's through, creative structure and an operating agreement that outlines what expectations are and how do you handle conflict and stuff of that nature. At the end of the day, it's really coming together for the sake of the company more than anything.
I'm just curious, have you always done that just as a family with your own knowledge, or have you ever had an outside family business consultant or anything work on that with you?
Never really a specific, call it, family business consultant. We've had attorneys that have had to, step in at various points in times that, we had an event, and then through that event, we, made a modification or a change to the operating agreement or whatever else to, learn from mistakes in the past. We've, attended some of the, outside family business associations and so on and so forth. I've struggled to kind of find some value with some of those, things, just looking at some of the experience and some of the trials and tribulations that I've been through. I kind of felt that I've unfortunately found more experience just going through some tough times with family stuff. I think we're in a much better, space today and have better, structure and understanding that really allows the company to succeed.
Any particular structures or practices you've put in place, or just,
I mean, more than anything, it's really just having, a set of family rules that are written into the operating agreement that really set those expectations relative to, hey, just because your name is, Basile or whatever it is, that you're not going to get any job or any paycheck. It's, hey, here's the expectations, and it's really driving the mentality, I think at an early age, being like, look, just because of who you are, that means that you need to do the job better than anybody else. Because you have something to prove. You can't, there's no free rides,
Yeah, and I think that's, you talked about you came right out of college and went right to it. That's impressive, because I know from what I see and hear that the whole team respects you, and so the fact that you have proven it and done it and what you've accomplished in the growth is really quite impressive. And you stood up to that challenge of, hey, I came in with the name. I've always been here, but I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna outwork and show you what I can do.
For me, it was always, and I had the fortune of being around my grandfather for a number of years while he was, still alive. He passed away in 2003. So through that entire, childhood, I worked in the plant. Once I officially was old enough to get working papers, it was summers and vacations, school vacations, were working in the company, on the plant level. So, really gaining that respect and appreciation for what it takes for the company to operate, as well as the car rides with my dad, where he would constantly, tell me like, hey, people are going to look at you a certain way. You got to make sure that, you know what you're doing, that you're working harder than anybody else, out there. So just really having that mentality, I think, shapes, who I am as an individual.
Are there any family members who chose not to join the business?
Yes, we have a few that are not in the business, more cousins of mine more than anything. My dad's entire generation was here in the business in some shape or form. Some of them have retired and moved on, but I have a few cousins who just chose a different path. And it wasn't that they never had an opportunity to join. They just made a conscious decision that, they want to do something else, which is, perfectly fine. So yeah, we absolutely do. And, as far as another, generation, that could also be the case there too.
So there is hopes to move to a fifth generation.
Absolutely.
Awesome. How do you ensure that those who are out of the business or chose not to be, how do you ensure they still feel kind of included in the legacy?
So to some degree, I think, to be honest, that's hard to do. For me, I have always had an open door, and as we have, like, call it our annual, meeting and whatnot, I have always, said to the rest of the family, being like, look, if anybody ever wants to talk about, how we're doing, what's going on, more than happy to have conversations and talk about what's going on, keep you informed. I wish I could say a lot of them have taken me up on that, but they just haven't. But all you can do is offer. We still will have our annual meeting where updates are provided, but I think it's important to just continue to convey, that inclusion is there, whether they want to or feel they need to be aware of what's going on. That's a personal decision that everybody has to make.
You can lead the horse to water. You can't make them drink it.
That's correct.
Well, speaking about legacy, and I know that's super important to the Basile family and to Catania family at the broader level, what is the deeper purpose that drives you in the company today?
I think for me specifically, it's really carrying that torch. We view this as the family legacy, the heirloom that is passed down through, generations. We have almost 300 employees, who depend on this company for them to provide for their families. So for me, it's really, I think, about preserving the company and making it stronger for the next generation.
How does being a multi-generational family business impact your responsibility to those employees, suppliers, broader community?
So, for me, we have what we call our purpose. And yes, we are a for-profit corporation where you want to make money first and foremost. And without making a profit, you really can't do anything else. But we have an actual saying relative to what our purpose is, the purpose being deeper than the generic, hey, we're here to make money type of thing. And that is, we exist to create an everlasting impact with our employees, our customers, and our community. Look, we're all going to be here for some period of time. You might have somebody that comes to work with us for a month, 6 months, 5 years. We've recently had employees that were over 50 years working for us. So the way we kind of look at it is, look, you have an everlasting impact by being here at Catania. I had recently an employee who was with us for 10 years leave us. This was a few years ago. He relocated down to South Carolina. He was up here visiting his daughter who was graduating for like nursing school or something to that degree. And out of the blue, my cell phone is ringing. Reggie Smith is calling, and I'm like, oh, why is Reggie calling me? Hey, I'm outside in your waiting room. Can I say hi? And it's things of that nature that just having that everlasting impact, that you have those connections and experiences that you have, being associated with Catania. As you may not know, every Thanksgiving, we do a big turkey fry 2 days before Thanksgiving. It's one of our signature events, really bringing together the employees, the families, having that family meal. And I always say that to people who are moving on. Recently, we had 2 guys that just retired, and I said to them, don't be a stranger. Tuesday before Thanksgiving, what we'll be doing? Come on by. So it's really creating that sense of everlasting impact when you reflect and look back at your time here, that we had that impact on you on a personal level.
I love that term, everlasting impact, and I love the idea of the turkey fry. We do a much smaller event here at 12 Points with just the employees. That's very impressive to do that with 300 employees.
And I would also add, we recently launched what we call Catania Cares. So Catania Cares is about the tie-in to the community, and it's a group of employees here that make up a committee, and they look for various things to be doing, to support, the community, whether it's volunteering to support, a food bank or whatever it is, or a financial, donation. Our signature event that we do is we do an annual golf tournament. Back in 1988, I lost my uncle to leukemia at a very young age. He was 38 years old. My uncle started a fundraiser, which was a golf tournament the following year. So we're on our 35th year, and all proceeds go to the Jimmy Fund, Dana-Farber. And we've been doing this, like I said, for 35 years. We have raised over $1.5 million year to date. Early on, the donations were rather small, 10 grand or so. The last, 10 years, our donations now are like $150,000 to $180,000 every year. So we've really been able to leverage the size of the company and increase our donations to that, charity. So this year we're having it at Pine Hills, end of September. On our website is all the information, and there's still spots open.
Yeah, so tell us where they can find, what is the website?
CataniaOils.com, CATANIA oils.com.
Absolutely. So if you're a golfer and you want to support the Jimmy Fund and a great cause and a great family, go to CataniaOils.com, check out the golf tournament, and grab one of those spots. It'll be a fantastic day, some awesome people, and a really good cause that you can support. So, all right. So, what is one myth about family businesses that you'd love to bust?
That's a good one. I guess it's that they don't survive. I mean, I hear it all the time, like, hey, you're a dinosaur or whatever else. And a lot of times you hear that they don't survive, past the 3rd generation, which, yeah, statistically, that's probably true, but it ain't a rule. And, for me, I think it's, look, we've prioritized, culture, leadership development, strategic planning. And, look, longevity doesn't happen by accident. It happens when each generation builds for the next, not just themselves. So I think it's really being focused on, leaving the company in better hands to that next, generation.
And that goes back to that reinvesting the profits and everything you've done, because a lot of the reasons they don't survive is that the early generations, they look, power to them. They take as much as they can, and they earned it. They had that opportunity. It's not a judgment, but in order to build something sustainable, like you said, it's intentional. You don't accidentally get to the 4th and 5th generation. So speaking of that, what are you doing to prepare the 5th generation if they should choose to join?
So it's actually in motion right now. So I'm the oldest of the 4th generation. I have 3 kids. My oldest will be 21 in about 2 months. I have a 19-year-old daughter and a 16-year-old daughter. So they are the three oldest of the fifth generation. There's 14 grandkids in my family, my father's, grandkids. My aunt and uncle have, probably about a half a dozen or so. So it's probably about 20 or so in that fifth generation. I think I mentioned earlier that I had the opportunity at a very early age to get my hands dirty. Well, it's not like it was 30 years ago where you can throw a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old into a plant. The HR manager and safety manager would have my head. So it wasn't until my son was 18 that he really was able to come, internal and start to kind of, follow in the footsteps, if you will. So he's able right now to get a taste of what I experienced, a larger part of my, childhood. And certainly there's a new expectation that I've set for the fifth generation that you will go somewhere else and work out of college. You are not going to come out of college and come to work for the family business, because it's critical to get that outside experience. And I've told them all that, hey, you may go and you may get a job somewhere and you may be on a particular career path that you're happy and have no interest in coming here. That is fine. I respect that. And if that's what happens, then so be it. After working somewhere else 3 to 5 years, if there's still that interest and opportunity presents itself, we'll figure it out. We'll have some conversations and we'll work through it. So we're kind of right at that, pivotal point where the fifth generation is starting to be of age, where there's that opportunity, but it's going to be under those, circumstances if I'm running the company.
Very cool. What advice would you give to the next generation of leaders in family-owned companies?
I guess my biggest advice is relative to, say, succession. Don't wait to start thinking and talking about, succession. Obviously, I look at my dad's situation. He lost his brother, and there really wasn't a succession plan at that particular point in time, but he was positioned to step in and take care of the company. Up until me coming into play, there really wasn't a succession plan. God forbid something happened to my father, we probably wouldn't be here. But I think succession is critical. It's really about recognizing that there needs to be a process of the communication, expectations, all of those things, here. So today we are in a much different, position where you have a full-blown leadership team that there's not, the company could function tomorrow if I wasn't here. Having key man insurance and there's other things in play to give the financial means to go off and hire a third-party consultant firm to, place a CEO, I think is, important. But, specifically if you are a family business that is small and in the process of scaling, you got to ask yourself those, questions. And, would you want your family to carry on the company? Would you want them to sell it? Can they sell it without you? So I think that piece, I think is important. And there's no blueprint, I think there's a whole host of, things to take into consideration, and it's better off to be thinking about something and have some type of action plan versus not giving it any thought and thinking that you're going to live forever.
Yeah, the invincibility of owners is not, that's another myth we can bust today. You're not invincible.
Sure.
Looking back, what do you wish you had known when you first took on a leadership role?
That I needed training on how to be a leader. I shared earlier about, my story and my perspective on that. And, for me, I think that's the biggest, thing is, I always got a lot of, good feedback relative to the tasks or the things that I was being given, I was doing and I was doing well. And I would attribute that to like, I know what I'm doing, but boy, did I not know what I'm doing from a leadership perspective. And I think over time, things just happened very quickly. And the years went by rather quickly as well. So for me, I think it was, I would say that it's really that leadership training path, program, having something in place. I wish I would have done sooner.
Well, you've done a heck of a job getting there from everything I see and everything I'm happy to learn from you in our Vistage meetings. So very impressive. I only have a couple of questions left. So if anyone on the webinar here has any questions, you can feel free to type them in the chat and I will ask them. But Joe, what does success look like to you today? And how has that changed since the early years, if at all?
I guess what I would say is, look, early on, success was about growth. It was about increasing sales, expanding our footprints, hitting those milestones. I don't think that's gone away, that drive to grow the company and so on and so forth. But I think when we want to measure success today, I think it's deeper than that. I think it's about, building a sustainable, value-driven business that employees and the family are really part of, and that, future generations can continue to lead. Growth matters. It will always matter. But I think purpose and legacy matter more.
And no cobwebs. You can't stop growing. But yeah, the legacy, you can see it from the golf tournament to the way you treat your employees to the turkey fried, everything else, that how important legacy is to you guys, and you're building and continue to build one heck of one. So if your great grandfather could see Catania Oils today, what do you think he'd say?
So I guess it's an interesting question. I don't think they would ever, imagine or fathom this. What comes to mind when you ask that question actually is a real story that my dad had with his father, my grandfather. My grandfather passed away in December of 2003. In October of 2003, we were doing an open house for our most recent edition at that particular point in time. And my father has this really enjoyable memory with his dad, a moment in time that he shared with him at that event. And at that particular point in time, my grandfather was failing, health-wise. So he had a little scooter that he would, move around through the plant on. And he was sitting in the scooter with my dad, and he was just kind of like, staring down one of the aisles that was looking from one side of the factory to kind of the other. And my dad looked at him and said, Dad, what are you thinking about at this very moment in time? And his answer was, I never thought I would live to see something like this.
Wow.
Just thinking about, what he went through and how hard it was for him years ago to what we had at that particular, point in time. So to hear that from my grandfather back in 2003, to look at where we are 25 years later almost, and going back to what my great grandfather, they'd be blown away relative to what we have today.
That's a really awesome story, and I love seeing the emotion from you as you tell it too. That's a fantastic family legacy piece right there, and something that will definitely be captured, I know, as you tell that story to the fifth generation.
Yep.
So last question from me, and I don't see any at the chat at the moment, but how can the people who are on here today and who will continue to hopefully view this on replay, how can they learn more about your work, the company's journey, what you guys do?
Absolutely. You could certainly check us out online, CataniaOils.com. We're also pretty active on social media. I think we're on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. So we're actually celebrating 125 years. So we are working on a pretty cool video. We filmed it about 2 weeks ago. So there'll be a soon to be coming video that kind of takes you back in time and gives you some perspective as far as the company from the beginnings to today.
Well, we did just get some questions, so you're not off the hook that easy. But I will say, I'll make one more plug. I know you have a great PR firm that we both know very well, and they're doing a great job. So if you want to give them a quick plug, certainly.
Absolutely.
As well.
Tara Goodwin over at Goodwin Consulting. Met her through Vistage, and she's amazing. She makes us look good, really good.
Absolutely. And just one more thing before I get in their questions. Is there any way, I know you private label for a lot of other brands, is there anywhere that someone who's heard your story and wants to support your company, is those the kind of people I'd like to support? Where's a great place for them to do so?
We do a lot of work for Market Baskets and stuff at Stop and Shop as well. Our brand really isn't around very much anymore. At a retail perspective, we do a lot of private brand work for a lot of the retailers that are around us. A lot of the local restaurants that you go into, we're supporting, as well as food manufacturers. We sell oils and ingredient to someone like Gorton Seafood or Cape Cod potato chips or Cedars hummus, examples of that nature. So if you go into your cabinet and you open up your cupboard, we're probably all around and you don't know it.
Well, at 500 million pounds, that doesn't surprise me. So, all right. So, question here: we are a CPA firm that works with multi-generational businesses. What do you find is the greatest disconnect working with outside professionals, and especially what you're trying to accomplish as a business and transition to the next generation?
I would say it's understanding the family dynamics. I think with any multi-generational, business, there's 14 different family members in some shape or form. Understanding the family, dynamics and how that works and kind of who's related to who is, certainly a challenge. I think some people within the family embrace and utilize the company's corporate call it advisors from a, personal perspective, where some family members don't. And they don't use anybody, which is a problem. So I think it's, making sure that there's that appropriate, call it, connection with the various, stakeholders and that they are, properly represented at the table.
And I'll just add one thing. I'm sure it's been challenging to go from the people that advised the earlier generations to your generation because the business is just so much larger. You can't continue to work with some of the same people. So that's got to be tough.
That is a similar, when you asked me about my biggest, challenge, I spoke about legacy employees. The same would be said about legacy advisors, because I also dealt with that where my father was very, very, very loyal to his, key people, his attorney, his CPA firm, his financial advisors. And there was a similar situation where some of those relationships we outgrew. And to be able to move on to a more appropriate size advisor is critical. But it's something that we really struggled with.
Yeah. So last question, I believe, I heard you encourage family to work outside the business first. Why is that important to you? And are there any types of roles or experience you think are especially valuable before joining a family company?
I would say it's important to me to really understand, I think, two things. One, not working for somebody that's related to you. Go work for somebody else that has no relationship to you, that you're going to gain that type of experience and appreciation for what that's like. Have real, call it, responsibilities, because sometimes you can kind of come in at a very early age and not comprehend or understand, like, hey, that's dad or cousin or uncle or whatever it is. Go have a real job, see what it's really like in the real world. Two, I think, obviously the company's different today than it was when I was growing up in it. But look, we know what we know. Go take and get experience somewhere else. You might learn something and bring those outside experiences here that are going to make us better. So for me, there's times today that I'm engaging with the leadership team and they're falling back on experiences elsewhere. I can't relate. I can't tell you that I worked for this other company and this is how they dealt with in this particular situation. So sometimes we have those type of conversations and I'm like, this is normal to me. This is how we operate. I don't know how other businesses operate. So I think just to gain that type of, call it, perspective is important. And then I think, lastly, when you look at types of experience, I think it really depends on what your interests are. For us years ago, when we didn't really have the team and so on and so forth, it would have been nice to have family members gain experiences in critical areas of the business and have a family member come in that could be a CFO or, supply chain expert or whatever it is, sales, So for us, for my family, we are somewhat sprinkled out through the different various areas of the business versus all being centralized in one particular area. So if you're a smaller business that are looking to scale and have family that's gaining outside experience, being able to have different family members gain different perspectives, finance, HR, so on and so forth, and bring those things internal, I think would be beneficial.
Awesome. Well, I will leave you the chance for a last word if there's anything that you'd like to share with everybody as a last kind of thought, overarching thought.
Yeah, I would say, look, running a family business, there is no blueprint. You got to get involved. You got to make, connections. Don't be afraid to ask, help. If you have customers or friends that have family businesses, I think it's important to, connect and have somebody to lean on, whether it is a business advisor, whether it is a CEO peer-to-peer group. It can be very lonely at the top. So make sure that you have some appropriate support system out there that you can turn to, because sometimes there are things that you need to deal with that you can't go internal with and talk to people. Hey, you have to be able to lean on somebody else. So that is, I think, one of the most important things that I've learned. And always open to connect with anybody that wants to know more or wants to develop a relationship.
And I can tell you all that Joe is a voracious learner. He attends all masterminds that we have and offer at 12 Points, he really gets involved, and he could probably teach some of them, but he always comes and he says he learned something. So I always appreciate that. But he's always looking to better himself and be better for his employee, his company, and the people in community he touches. So very impressive. So last but not least, don't forget their golf tournament to support a great cause. I'm sure if you can't make the golf tournament, they'd be happy to take a donation as well at CataniaOils.com. You can reach out and find out more about that. And Joe, thanks again for joining us. Really appreciated the conversation and everything you do. So congratulations on a great legacy that you guys are really continuing to crush.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Joe. Take care, everyone. Thanks all for joining.
Thanks.